Joining me on the podcast today is Sophie Coulthard. Sophie is the founder of Don't Ban Me, License Me, a grassroots movement that began in September 2023 when the UK government announced the XL bully ban. At the time, Sophie was simply an American bully owner with a TikTok account. But when she realized that her own dog's future could be threatened if he fell into the XL bully typing, she started using her platform to talk about alternatives to a ban. Her message quickly resonated, attracting a group of like-minded volunteers, and together they launched Don't Ban Me, License Me. Since then, the campaign has raised over £200,000 to mount a legal challenge. It has been described by charities and rescue centres as the most successful dog-related fundraiser in UK history, and it has built a powerful online community that shifted the conversation towards responsible ownership and licensing. The legal case remains ongoing, with the appeal still in progress today. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me.
I met you at the AppDog meetings in London a couple of months ago, and I learned a little bit about Don't Ban Me, License Me. You are an XL bully owner, is that correct?
Technically, yes. Yes. Well, this actually opens a whole can of worms straight away because we can then debate what an XL bully actually is. I believed, according to the government guidelines, that my dog was an XL bully. I have had him independently assessed, and they have said that they do not believe he is an XL bully. But I think people know me as an XL bully owner, so that's fine. We can stick with that.
Interesting. Okay. What did they say the mix was?
Well, because XL is literally just the size of the dog. And this is what I think a lot of people, if you don't have one of these breeds, I think you'd probably be quite unaware of this when I talk about it with friends and things. Obviously, we have a number of banned breeds in the UK, the XL bully being the most recent one that was added. But an XL bully is not a breed of dog. It's a set of measurements, characteristics of what a dog looks like that say that dog is an XL bully. And it's down to things like height, head size, chest size, fur type, things like that. And when I believed Billy was an XL bully, although I did have a lot of people when I was appearing in the media saying to me that they didn't think he was. So that was interesting. And then I had him independently assessed, and they said that he just was not big enough. They said his head wasn't big enough, his chest wasn't big enough. And the thing that I found the most amusing is they said that his waist was not enough of a rectangle, which I had to laugh about, because does a rectangle waist indicate a more dangerous dog than a dog that has a nipped in waist? This is where the argument goes, really, when we talk about banned breeds over here. But for the purposes of the interview, then yeah, we can absolutely say that Billy is an XL bully.
Oh, no, I'd rather it be accurate. But either way, you've kind of been pulled into this enormous cause with a background in business, and then all of a sudden you're an activist taking the UK government to court. Like, this is huge. Firstly, I would like to understand your relationship with your dog. Like, how did you find him? How did he come into your life? What were you looking for? And, did you grow up with Billy?
I grew up with boxers, so they are a bull breed, and I had boxers. I think my earliest childhood photos, we've got boxers in the house. And the last one that we had when I was probably going into my late teens as a family. And then it was interesting because he was actually quite a reactive dog as well. So he wasn't very good with other dogs. He could be quite protective. And when you look at kind of how far along we've come with training now, then perhaps when you could only buy a book or a video on how to train your dog or go and see a dog trainer, it's interesting to think about what you do differently. It also made me very conscious when I was to get my own dog that I wanted a really well-trained dog. Number one, because I was always going to have a bull breed, because that's what I'd grown up with. And I knew the stigma that comes with having that type of dog, whether it's a boxer or a staffy or some kind of mixed bull breed. There would always be that judgment, I think. And then also because of the experience of having a dog that could be a little bit difficult, I knew that I wanted a really well-trained dog so that we could avoid the sort of things that I had with that dog growing up. And I was looking at the different bull breeds and I lived in London, so I kept running into people with these dogs that to me looked a bit like a staffy, but just bigger. And I thought, oh, well, that looks good, because that type of dog would probably handle hikes and longer walks and, just be a bit more suited to my lifestyle. So I did some research, looked into the American Bully. I don't know how much the term XL Bully was being used at that time, and then ended up obviously getting Billy as a puppy, 3 months old. And it's so funny because you go through, I think, the first 2 years of a dog's life. So it can be so challenging as an owner, especially as a new owner, as they develop and they get naughty and then they learn things and then they unlearn things. I mean, how he is now, he's the perfect dog for me.
I see.
I've worked hard, but he's got a great nature as well, and he's just an absolute pleasure to be around. And we all miss him if he's away for a night, or he's gone somewhere for to hang out with a friend or something. Then yeah, we all feel like the house is empty without him.
Cute. How old is he now?
He's just turned 3.
Oh, so this was just what, briefly after COVID, you decided to get a puppy. So did you buy him or was he rescued?
Yeah, we did buy him. And it is interesting because I think, having been involved in dogs since, it's not something I would do again. I would always rescue now, having learnt much more about the state of dog rescues in the UK and, what's going on over here. But yes, we did buy him as a puppy. So yeah, it's
Do you? I
yeah.
know it's a tricky question because there's a lot of weight to it depending on where you lean on the shop don't shop debate. But this is not kind of the arena for that. When you bought him as a puppy and you went to the breeders, like what was that journey like for you, and what were you looking for, if you can still remember?
I did a lot of research, and actually, I think if I was aware at the time, I may have seen some warning signs as to what was to come with the XL Bully ban, because there were a lot of people posting dogs for really high sums of money online for a start. And I think anywhere that you have dogs selling for that much, and we're coming out of COVID by this time as well, so I didn't want to jump on the bandwagon of getting a dog during COVID, because I knew life would eventually change. But I think we were pretty much out of it when that decision was made. And yeah, it was definitely looked into some different options and felt uncomfortable with the breeder, or felt that the dogs were perhaps not in the sort of environment that I would like to take a puppy home from. But then eventually, after lots of searching, found a breeder who was a family that had children. The puppies were being brought up in the family home around the dog parents and children as well. And I really felt very different when I connected with that breeder, that they wanted the right owners for their puppies as well. So I definitely felt comfortable taking Billy, and felt that he'd been brought up in the right environment.
Amazing. And so I guess previously you didn't have much experience with raising a bully, but kind of like, what was your journey in terms of learning what they needed in order to kind of get the optimal behavior out of him?
It was so, do you know what? It was so hard because it is you get hit in the face basically with all of the YouTube videos and all of the Instagram accounts and all of the TikToks that you can follow. And I definitely fell into a trap at the very beginning of trying different things that I was seeing in different videos from different trainers. And I realized that I was completely overwhelming myself. And then I decided to just follow one training plan and focus on one sort of way of doing things. And that was really helpful for me. And I'm quite good at, I like to learn. I kind of get into something, even if I bought a new coffee machine the other week and I've been watching so many videos on how to make the perfect coffee. I want to get it right.
Yeah.
So once I kind of got the hang of it, and then I think it was acknowledging as he got older, I think if people listening have dogs that might remember this, 4 months, perfect, absolutely perfect. He knew how to do everything. He was getting there with toilet training. He was walking lovely. And then they get to a little bit older, and then the rebellious stage kicks in and they become quite hard work. And that's when I started to think, right, I'm not going to do this all on my own. I'm going to work with a trainer and actually go and see someone and have that hands-on approach. And so I really did. I do think that I went above what maybe many dog owners do, because I was just so wanted to get it right with him.
Yeah, amazing. Do you remember what their approach was? Because there's so much conflicting information online, and also a lot of people end up working with people that they like as a person as opposed to their philosophy or methodology or outlook on training and dogs and their position in the world. What were you looking for, and what made you choose this particular trainer?
This was quite hard because before I got involved, I didn't know that there was different types of training, and you hear these terminologies now that I was not familiar with at all. R plus, I think. I couldn't tell you what that means, but you hear all these different things and you think, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to train my dog to walk nicely beside me. I went and did a couple of kind of day training sessions with different dog trainers, and then I ended up finding one fairly local to me, and Daisy, who was my trainer, she has got Doberman herself, so she has relatively big dogs, strong dogs, and I found that everybody that went to her either had a bully or a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd, or a dog that's got a bit of a size and a bit of power to them. And so I felt that that was right for me. And what I really liked was how much she watched and then kind of gave me advice on what to do and suggested things without saying, you must do it like this.
Mhm.
Another thing that really appealed to me is that she does pack walks with the dogs. So if you're a client, you can take your dog, and she gives a variety of kind of weekend dates. We all get together somewhere like Richmond Park or, Wimbledon Common or Crystal Palace, and we will walk the dogs together, and they're not off lead, but we do bits of training with them. And it's just really important that they all get used to each other. And it is funny because you get a lot of attention when you walk with a big group of big dogs like that. They do
Yeah,
get a lot of looks, but a lot of people are impressed with how well behaved they all are.
amazing.
So yeah, it's kind of confusing, and you do have to find what's right for you. I definitely grew up in a kind of no nonsense house. I grew up in a military house as well. So for me, some of the fluffier aspects of dog training didn't appeal to me as much. For me, a dog is still a dog. He was crate trained. There's certain things that felt right for me in that dog training world. And luckily for Billy, he adapted really well to anything that was going on with his training. He loves it. So
He does.
yeah.
Amazing. Do you think, with hindsight, did the trainer train you more than the dog, or the dog more than you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about the consistency of your own behavior, isn't it? Are you doing things properly, or are you giving the dog mixed messages in what you're doing? And that was really interesting to learn. And also, I think some of the challenges that you have when you have different handlers of the dog as well. So, you'd find that someone in the house is doing one thing and someone else in the house is doing another thing. And you can tell that straight away, even with things like feeding a dog from the table. You think, I've never done that. Why has he suddenly come to the table now? Who's been feeding him? So
The clues. So did you have any kind of preconceived ideas about his particular breed before you had him, and then by having him, did any of that change?
the ideas that I had about the American Bully were based off of videos that I'd seen online and dogs that I'd met in real life. The dogs that I'd met in real life had all been really well behaved. And then the videos that I'd seen online, which were mostly from the US, kind of short documentaries on YouTube, was really saying that the breed was developed and bred, although a relatively new breed, I think originally bred in the 80s, but by crossing different kind of bull breeds together. They were supposed to be a companion dog first. So the idea is that they would be this family dog. And I know that some people may listen to this and think, gosh, that's so different from what I've seen in the media and the media portrayal. And it absolutely is. But I think fundamentally, my dog has fulfilled what he was supposed to be. He's got the energy when we're out for a walk, and he's fun to go out with. He also does have that sort of lazy bull breed aspect where he's quite happy to just crash out on the sofa and, cuddle up to you. And he's great. Since I've had Billy, my sister's had a baby. So we've had a baby go from newborn to toddler that he's seen on a regular basis. And he's been brilliant with him. So, and with other dogs, which I know is something that a lot of people say about these types of breeds, is that they are, bred to fight, is something that you hear a lot because of the sort of pit bull connotation. He's so friendly with other dogs. It's just not anything that I've seen.
At the beginning, when you got him, perhaps even before he had a trainer, what types of dogs did you walk him with? Because my understanding is that, especially with, younger dogs, it is, again, this is only my understanding. I don't know if it's the way it should be or not, but I've read that you should seek out in a park, for example, examples of well-behaving dogs, and then encourage your dog or set up opportunities for your dog to socialize with said dogs in order to have the information passed to them with regards to what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, because they kind of nip at each other to kind of say like, whoa, back off, or they
Yeah.
get the message through those interactions. Did you do something similar, or is it kind of going from you and your family directly to the trainer and therefore to the group
And
walks?
yeah, it can be, again, so confusing, and there's so much conflicting advice on social media as well. So it was about, okay, well, what feels right for us? And I definitely thought when he was younger, I tried to keep all dogs away from him.
Oh, did you?
And yeah, and I was quite, if an off-lead dog would come bounding over, I'd think, oh my gosh, what if he has a bad experience? How will that impact on him? And I think I was almost probably a little bit too militant, the impressions he was having at that young age. I joined a group called Honest Hounds. The reason why I joined the group was because you could connect with other local dog owners, and the idea is that you could go on walks together, and it wasn't through a trainer. But what I found was like-minded dog owners who didn't want their dogs to have a bad experience. And we would meet up normally on a Saturday morning. We would walk the dogs together. They'd all be on lead. We'd practice some things like even just crossing paths. A lot of dogs struggle with that head-on pass because it can feel quite, I don't know, it must put some pressure on them when they have to walk right past another dog head on. And we would practice things like that together, and we'd always sort of go with what the dogs were comfortable with. But it really, really helped, and it was a really nice environment to have people that weren't saying, oh, they'll be fine, just let them off, they'll figure it out between them, is not the avenue that I wanted to go down personally. So I wanted a little bit more control, and that really helped meeting other people.
Amazing. And so you kept him on the lead. Was that because of the impressions people had of this particular breed of dog? Was it your own anxiety? What influenced that? Just wanting to protect him and not give him a bad experience?
So at the time he was still quite young, so I wouldn't have trusted him to let him off lead because he didn't have perfect recall at that time. So a couple of the kind of foundational things that I believed, I probably still believe, is that, people shouldn't be letting their dogs off if they're just going to charge around and go and terrorize other dogs. So if you can't call your dog back, then you should reconsider where you're walking your dog, or whether you should let your dog off lead. So at the time he wouldn't have been ready. He probably would have bound up to every dog around. And we had some nervous dogs in the group as well. So it was all about us being able to be under control. I know that we had a few dogs that were really well trained at the time, and they would let them off. And that was always interesting as well, because then your dog is experiencing a dog off lead with more freedom, but we trusted that dog would not come over and, wouldn't bother the dogs that were on a lead. Yeah, it's been so interesting learning all this stuff. Now, funnily enough, we're very lucky where we live because we do have a bit of land as well. I am comfortable with him off lead, and I can call his name and he will come straight back to me. So yeah, we are lucky, and we've got a big garden, and the postman comes through the gate, and I will call him back mostly because I don't want him jumping up at anyone. You just want to know that they feel comfortable when they come through the gates.
You speak of your garden, and it made me think of your TikToks. What made you, I think you started posting some of your training videos on TikTok, is that correct?
Yeah, I did. So that actually led into the whole campaign against the XL bully ban. And it's so funny because it happened in a matter of a month, 2 months maybe. And
Wow.
I literally decided, I had so many videos of this dog on my phone, and I thought, what am I going to do with all of these? And so I started a TikTok account, and I thought, I'm just going to post a couple of videos, cute videos. Then I started posting some of the training things that had worked for us. And I'm not a dog trainer at all. It was just what had worked. And then I gained a following really quickly, which I didn't expect. I wasn't particularly trying. I was just trying to get them off my phone. And then when the media started to ramp up some of the news stories about the XL bully, and some of these terms that we're used to hearing now, like devil dogs and this, that, and the other, started to emerge, I felt strongly about that. And I felt strongly about how the breed was being portrayed. And so some of my TikTok videos then started to get more political. And I started to talk about what an alternative to a ban could be. And this was before the ban was announced, or what should be happening in the UK for responsible dog ownership. That's when Times Radio picked up on my TikTok and asked if they could interview me and Billy. And from there, when the ban was announced, that's when all the media attention really spiraled. And I did become sort of the spokesperson, I guess, for what was going on from an owner perspective. And I think what happens with the media is they just pass your number around. So journalists pass your number, you start getting phone calls. And I was thinking, well, if I don't do this interview, who will?
Yeah.
And so things just spiraled from there, really.
Wonderful. And so did you have any kind of media training up until that point?
No.
You didn't?
Oh
my God.
No, I mean, I do, I'm quite fortunate in the fact that my work aligned quite well with what ended up happening. So I work in leadership training. I teach people how to become more confident. A lot of the things that I do in my day job, I present a lot. I do a lot of public speaking, although normally that's, in a conference center to people talking about things that I would say I have fairly expert knowledge on. So to then be kind of thrust into the radio and on TV talking about dogs was quite different and quite challenging at times. But no, you learn as you go. You wing it, essentially.
You wing it. Oh, you fake it till you make it. But what an incredible thing, though. It's almost as if destiny has primed you for that opportunity. And then when like everything developed the way that it did, it was like, wow, boom, like the conditions were perfect and you became the face of and the spokesperson for this very, very important cause. So what was the catalyst for that to happen, just for people who may or may not understand the prelude to the ban?
Yeah, so I think it was possibly, I'm going to take a guess, 19th of September 2023, when the ban was announced by Rishi Sunak in the media. And I actually found out through a journalist. So a journalist called me up and wanted my initial reaction. I'd already been featured quite heavily in things like the Daily Mail and things like that. So a lot of this kind of build up to the ban announcement, there was so much in the media every single day. And every day we were seeing a new attack. It was strange, almost surreal, almost, that you would turn on the news and there would be another dog attack. Interestingly, the Birmingham attack, which was really the catalyst for the ban being announced, we found out later on down the line, was not an XL bully. It was a crossbreed, and the owner had a muzzle order on that dog. There was all sorts of different things that came out later on down the line. However, the ban was announced. Immediately, people started contacting me on TikTok and saying, what do I do? Will my dog be put to sleep? At that point, we had no real information other than that the dogs were going to be banned, or the breed was going to be banned. I very quickly reached out for help and managed to gather 10 wild, passionate dog owners like myself who said, we're with you. What can we do? How can we help? And we initially just wanted to get accurate information to owners that would support them and not scaremonger and not make them feel like they were alone in this. And so that was our initial plan. And then we learned from a incredible solicitor called Rebecca Strong, who is the owner of XL Bullies as well, that there was a possibility of a legal challenge. And she was very clear that it's not an appeal. You're not saying we don't like this ban, we want it to go away. It's a judicial review. And a judicial review means that you are challenging the way that law was made. And ultimately, if we look at the timeline, the announcement was made early September and the ban came into effect in December, which is quite a short amount of time for a ban to have been weighed up. When we make laws in this country, you can't just say, I want to create this law, done. We have a process which laws are supposed to be made. So our challenge was saying, we don't think this ban was made lawfully. I know this sounds so complex, but it was the only way to challenge the ban.
Yeah.
And there was a possibility that if a judge agreed that the government did not go the right way about making the ban, that the ban could be overturned. So what we knew at the time was that we would need to start some kind of campaign group and raise funds, because it was going to cost a lot of money to take the government to court. I've never done it before. I don't know if any listeners have. You were entering kind of unknown territory, really. And then, so we started a fundraiser. We decided to set up a company in order to kind of house that, so it wasn't all falling onto one person and making one person totally liable, and also to give it some legitimacy, because if you think about it, there were a lot of very scared and worried owners that were hearing all sorts in the media and social media. How do you get people to trust you very quickly and be willing to donate money to a cause like that? So it really was a challenge, but we pulled together and we raised, actually it was ended up being about £218,000 within the space of a few months, which was, I believe, the biggest dog related fundraiser that's happened in the UK in that space of time as well.
Yeah.
So really incredible. And I think one of the really beautiful things is that it wasn't just XL bully owners that were donating. The messages that came through on the GoFundMe from people that had cockapoos, but there was an XL bully down the road that was lovely, or people that had, you know, all sorts of different breeds that were set, or people that just fundamentally disagreed with breed specific legislation, wanted to see something done about it. And whenever is there a better time than when the media speculation and everything was at this all-time crescendo, I guess. In the 30 years since breed specific legislation came into place, ever been a stronger time to challenge it. So yes, that's kind of where everything took us. So we were a huge fundraising challenge, huge support to the legal team, because bearing in mind we had a very, very small legal team, particularly compared to the government's legal team, to try to gather evidence, to try to do anything we could to prove that the government hadn't followed due process in order to make this ban. And then what we also had was well, okay, if you don't want to ban XL bullies, what do you want to do? So then we had to start thinking about what the alternative was and how do we sort of craft a campaign that people could get behind as well.
Amazing. And so firstly, if we take a quick step back, what gave you the confidence to set up this movement? Was it the people who said, hey, you know, kind of they raised their hands and said, we're with you, we'll support you, and let's do this thing? Or like, where did the idea come from? And what was kind of like the catalyst where you thought, like, I can actually affect change here? Or were you quite uncertain and you just thought, we'd just wing it? Like, what was take me through your thought process.
Oh gosh. Well, I remember because I was actually on a business trip in America. So I was at a conference that I was involved in the organization of the conference. So I was really busy. I was jet lagged. I was trying to participate in a conference, and I was having, you know, WhatsApp messages and late night calls with the solicitor, with various other people who could get involved, including some of the Americans, such as Dave Wilson, who is the founder of the American Bully Kennel Club, and people that were just saying, is this the only option? And yes, it was the only option. We need a group to kind of spearhead this. There was a lot of things going on at the time. There were a lot of other campaign groups that were obviously against the ban, that were trying to make a lot of noise, protest. And I think the general feeling was that a protest group was probably not the right type of group to bring a legal challenge to court. You almost needed a group that had a bit more of a squeaky clean image, a bit like a charity, where that would shine through in the campaign. And I guess because we had focused at that point on educational content, it was us or no one, really.
Natural.
And I don't think I thought too much about it, to be honest. I think I was just jet lagged and probably under a bit of time pressure, and just thought, okay, fine, let's do it then. If not us, then who? What's the worst that can happen? I think almost that was the best way to go into it, rather than overthinking it, to be honest. And certainly not thinking too much about affecting long-term change in that sense. I think all of us really, from a selfish perspective, wanted the best thing for our own dog. And that's why I think a group of XL bully owners was the right group to take that challenge on and start that campaign, because we felt so passionately about it.
Wonderful. And so, like, for those people who may not know, like, what were some of the other consequences as a result of the ban? Because I think for myself, I didn't have much exposure to bullies ever. And so I can hands up say the media influenced me, and there's a bias in the back of my mind that bullies are dangerous. I have absolutely no evidence of that myself. It is just a bias created through the media. So I have awareness of it, and I'd love to change that with time and obviously experience. But that aside, because the only thing I would have thought was, oh, okay, so they're banned, which means, okay, they've got to be muzzled when you walk them. That was my understanding. What were some of the kind of deeper underlying issues that came as a result of that bully ban, other than just not being able to walk your dog outside?
And I think we should come back to that, though, because I do think one of the things that we always try to say is that we do acknowledge that there were dangerous dogs, and there were dogs that were attacking people, and there were deaths as a result. So something absolutely needed to be done. So we should probably come back to that. But in terms of kind of how it was impacting owners, or how we learned it would impact us, it's really interesting, because a lot of what you heard was, well, these dogs will just have to be muzzled and they'll just have to be on a lead. And that doesn't sound like too big a deal. But the reality is, when you are a dog owner, for me, I think it really hit me when I took my dog to the park, and we used to do a lot of training while we were out and about. So I would take a toy, and a lot of the things I would do would be to play with the toy with him, and we were practicing, drop it. They're all important things, I think, when you have a dog, teaching your dog to be able to drop something on command, or being able to, whatever it might be. And I realized that we weren't going to be able to do that anymore, because he's not going to be able to get a toy or a ball through his muzzle. Not being able to let a dog off lead and run free. Okay, you can go and use a private field, but private fields, for anyone who lives near one, can sometimes get so fully booked up. It's so difficult to try and get into one. And that's obviously if you have access, if you have a car, or if you've got one close by. And you think of all the people that may live in cities. And obviously I was in London at the time, and I think the nearest private field to me was probably a 30-minute drive away. So that's what I was going to have to face on a regular basis in order just to give my dog a decent amount of exercise. Then you have things like the loss of health insurance for a lot of people. So most health insurance providers for pets will not insure a banned breed. So okay, you can put money aside, you can do all of those things, but for people who had dogs that were being supported by their insurance, to have that suddenly taken away from them was obviously going to have consequences.
Yeah.
Then you have things like people that were facing being evicted, because either their landlord, or if they were in social housing, the housing provider would not allow banned breeds in the property. So there's things like that happening. Then we were starting to hear stories of social services being concerned when there was an XL bully in a house with children, when there were perhaps parents that were separated and social services had been involved, or whatever reason. Then again, you were seeing people faced with having to give up their dog. And then I suppose neutering as well ended up being an issue. And I'm not against neutering per se. I recognise that, if more dogs were neutered, then it would prevent unwanted puppies, all of the things of why neutering can be a good thing. And luckily I had no issues with Billy being neutered. But what quickly happened when the neutering deadlines started to approach is that a lot of bull breed lines have a blood condition that I can't talk about with any level of expertise, but it was essentially causing dogs to have real issues when they were having neutered in terms of bleeding out. So vets being unable to stop the bleeding in these dogs. And apparently it's a condition that can be quite common with greyhounds. But where we were seeing this mass neutering happening because of the deadlines, a lot of people were having serious complications with their dogs. And that's obviously devastating as an owner when you're going through all of this change at the same time. We actually had it with two different people in our group who had dogs that very nearly lost their lives. Fortunately didn't, but very nearly did because of this blood issue. So again, I guess from that, it's that feeling of, well, I was forced to do it. I had no other choice. I had to put my dog through this, and it's nearly cost them their life. So what else? Doggy daycare, dog walkers, lots of issues there in terms of insurance. Boarding can be. So for a lot of people, if your dog's lived a relatively normal life, or if somebody's listening to this who's got, let's say a Spaniel or a Labrador, you would never have to face these types of issues.
No.
And maybe you might experience some if you have a very reactive dog, so your dog can't be looked after or things like that. But it's facing all of that at once, which can be a real challenge.
That's really devastating and very disruptive with far-reaching consequences. And I think a real shame around that is, like, if you had a group of various dogs lined up in front of me, someone who is an avid dog lover, such as myself, who have walked them for years and years and years, I still to this day would not be able to tell the difference between a regular bully and XL bully, that kind of thing. So how does the law get enforced, and how do they identify these dogs?
Yeah, and do you know, speaking of that as well, I think one of the biggest things that owners did face was the stigma of having a banned breed. And, you know, we've seen such a rise in bull breeds in rescue centres now. And I think so much of that comes down to how they are perceived by people and owners not being able to cope with that. I know a lot of people had abuse and have people say things to them when they're walking their dogs, or that facing that kind of judgment that why do you get a dog? So you can walk your dog in nature and it's part of your well-being and you have a lovely time and you get to experience all these lovely things. So to now be put under judgment and pressure because of your dog is really difficult. But in terms of how the law works, this is where it gets really dodgy, is my best way of saying it. And obviously it's something that I am in the middle of myself, because I have a dog that is, on one hand, is my dog an XL bully? And on the other hand, I've been told, no, your dog isn't an XL bully. And this is what a lot of owners faced, was that uncertainty. Because I think unless you knew the line of your dog and you could say categorically, my dog is the height, the size, they look like the stock images that the media were using or the police were using, you're essentially faced with a document that is the framework or the description of what an XL bully is. And you have to look at that and look at your dog and decide, do I exempt my dog now and have it fall into all these conditions that a banned dog has, or do I risk walking my dog down the street and possibly have a completely normal life until one day a neighbour reports them as an XL bully and the police have to attend and make a decision themselves. And then you get the difference, even though these people are hopefully trained to know what an XL bully is, and that's a whole other conversation. But then you may have difference in one police force to another police force as to whether your dog is an XL bully or not. It's the problem, I'll get on my high horse about breed specific legislation now, is that it's not actually about the breed, it's about what that dog looks like. And you could have a Staffordshire Bull Terrier crossed with a Weinerama, but if it comes out looking like the description of an XL bully and the police decide it's an XL bully, it's an XL bully. So it's I mean, maybe the Weinerama might not have been the best example, but you know, hopefully people understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yeah.
Hopefully people understand what I mean. And, you know, we spent the Christmas up to the deadline measuring the dog over and over again. My dog hates tape measures. If I got a tape measure out now, he would start barking at it. But we were just, is he tall enough? Is he not tall enough? He's on the cusp. What if, you know, it's that you're literally deciding your dog's future based off of a piece of paper that's saying, well, if it meets, it doesn't even say 10 of these criteria. It just says substantial.
Right.
Your dog is an XL bully.
That's ridiculous. The impact of that, first of all, you've got, you know, severe anxiety, because even taking your dog out for a walk, the dog could be seized if it's perceived to be an XL bully and it's not muzzled, or, you know, it doesn't meet the conditions that they've laid out for your dog. Like, that's a very stressful life to live.
It is. And so what we saw as a campaign group is that we were being inundated with messages from people that said, my dog is not an XL bully, but I know that people will think my dog is an XL bully. And so therefore I have chosen to exempt my dog. My dog will now have to be neutered. My dog will now have to, you know, and the advice from the government was on the
On the side of caution.
exempt your dog if you're not sure, and you will be able to de-exempt your dog later on down the line, should you believe at some point that your dog is not an XL bully. Because also bear in mind, we didn't really have sort of any decent official pictures. We hadn't seen pictures of dogs that had been seized that were confirmed as XL bullies at that time. So we were a little bit blind in terms of, well, what do they actually look like, you know? And so people were exempting their dogs, and still to this day, to today, we have no de-exemption process. So people may have exempted dogs and had to have had them neutered when their intention was always to de-exempt them. They were just trying to keep their dogs safe. So you have that on one side. And then on the other side, you have people that didn't exempt their dogs that may now feel that their dog is an XL bully and may be nervous to walk their dog in case they're worried about a knock on the door. And there is now no way other than a court route to have your dog exempt. So it's really tough. I don't think the average dog owner realizes the stress that these people go through. And yes, if anybody's listening thinking, but there were all these attacks and there was this and there was that, I agree. And we did see a rise in dog attacks, and dog attacks still continue to rise even with the ban in place. But there is 55,000+ exempt dogs. And I do not believe that there are 55,000 dangerous dogs. I think that there are many responsible owners who did what they had to do to keep their dog safe, and their dog would never be a threat. So I think that's sometimes when you look at the numbers like that, it does put things into perspective.
Based on what you know now today, if you were consulting with the government and they were saying, what are we supposed to do? The public need to feel safe. They need to see us take action. They need to, we need to send a very clear message. With hindsight, if you had a direct path to them, what would you say to them? What could be done? What would the alternative have been?
I think one of the really difficult things is that when we hear in the media about these attacks, and particularly the deaths, which are tragic, nobody should be losing their life to a dog. And it's really difficult because you see the media headline and we very rarely hear the circumstances, or we very rarely hear the detail about the situation going on behind the scenes. And I've always been very conscious not to talk about victims, and people individually in that way. But I think if I was an advisor to the government and I had seen the rise in attacks, I would have been saying to the government, listen, if you ban this breed, that's fine. But at some point, people will move on to another breed, and there will always be dog attacks. And if you look around the world, breed bans do not bring attack numbers down. The people who are breeding dogs for a status symbol or for a weapon will simply move on to another type of dog. And there are plenty to choose from. So you face either adding more dogs to the Dangerous Dogs Act, or you start to overhaul entirely. And I think this is something that charities, campaign groups have been campaigning for years. And unfortunately, the XL bully ban is a big setback in the work that people have been doing. But we believe, and our campaign mirrors what's already out there. We're not reinventing the wheel in terms of what our approach would have been. But first of all, looking at breeding, because it starts with the breeders. Why were dogs being bred to be, bigger and this, that, and the other? Breeders should be breeding for temperament. There should be a lot more being done around breeding standards in the UK. So that's one of our pillars, is regulating breeding. Responsible dog ownership, and people almost would a sort of driving awareness test, but for dog owners, help.
It's worked. Yeah, it's worked in Calgary.
It worked. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Calgary model, for anybody interested, should go and have a look at, because that is really interesting. Yeah. And also for people just having to get a license before getting a dog, because I could have a dog off Facebook by the end of the day. But if I had that step in between, then that might just put some people off, or help people to think about what breed they get, or whatever it might be. We then have proper recording of dog incidents is another pillar, because at the moment, how do you record a dog attack? If anyone listening's ever been attacked or been in that position. I was attacked in a London park, and did not know, do I call the police? And it was not a big dog that attacked me, and I almost felt silly reporting it, but I felt that it was important to. And, making that process simple, making that, recordable, where different boroughs and different councils can have that information logged in a secure way is important. Then we have education, education in schools, educating children, educating owners about dogs, I think is really key. And then finally, proper enforcement of the law, because we've all seen stories of people that have been abusive to dogs and animals that have been given a, 2-year ban on keeping an animal. I think if we could get, if we could get really decent enforcement of the law, then that would help as well.
By the sounds of it, something is being done, but the energy is going in all the wrong places. What do you think that says about us as a society in general when it comes to,
It's rules over what the right thing to do is. And this is what we're seeing. And actually, I can't remember which police force, but I remember seeing a police force actually coming out themselves and saying, if they get a call to say, I believe somebody has an XL bully that's not registered, that's not exempt, they have to go and attend that call. So they may show up at somebody's house where they may not have an XL bully, or they may, they can have a well-behaved dog, whatever it might be. That dog doesn't need to have shown any signs of danger. They just need to be reported as a dangerous breed, and the police will have to show up. Meanwhile, there could be some dog terrorizing other dogs in the local park, and they have to make that call. They have to go where the law is telling them to go, rather than to the dog that's causing havoc in a park somewhere. And I think that's where, unfortunately, our police are having to make decisions that might be against their own values of how they think we should be managing dogs in this
really
country.
Tough. Yeah, that's a really tough call to make. So I find it really hard to hear that these dogs are so judged for what they look like, when actually such a huge influence behind who they turn out to be is because of the humans, their guardians, technically. I call it guardianship because it's such a ginormous responsibility to be responsible for another sentient being in that way. And it feels really wrong and really unfair that, purely based on looks, there are all these judgments placed on an entire group of dogs, as opposed to the individuals that need more support and help.
And you're right, it is such a responsibility. And I think I got a good story, actually. So I'm in my family home at the moment. So my parents are here as well. And my mum was having an 80-year-old old colleague round for lunch. And so I took Billy and I tied him up in the garden, because I thought, I don't want him getting all excited when she arrives, and I don't know what her thoughts are on the dog and things like that. And I said to her, oh, don't worry, he had a little bark when she arrived, because he barks at cars when they pull up on the drive and things. And she said, oh, that's okay, as long as he's not coming near me or something, so she did judge him based on what he looked like. And then later on, I had to bring him in. I think it started raining, I'm not sure. I brought him in and we just kept an eye on him. I was just really conscious, this lady is older, didn't want him to get too boisterous. He's always going to be excited, his tail's going to do more damage than anything else from wagging. And by the end, when she left, she gave him a big stroke when she left, said goodbye to him, and I thought, I bet when she arrived, she wouldn't have thought that she would be touching him, stroking him, and actually enjoying the affection that he had. And I do think that if you can spend time around any breed of dog that's a good example, then they are going to show you, they're going to show you and turn you potentially if you were nervous or scared.
I think what you've done is really amazing, and also kind of all the issues that you've highlighted along that road. What happened in the end with taking the government to court? Where did that go?
Yes.
I think.
Where are we? So it's interesting because we've been to court so many times and there's been so many hurdles. So we had to go to court just to get permission to go forward to the judicial review. So we got permission originally. So that was a good success, because not many actually make it to court properly, make it to that stage. So that judge felt that we had an arguable case. Then we had the full judicial review, and the judge took it away and ruled with the government and said that, I don't know what the correct legal wording is, but we were unsuccessful in the judicial review. Our legal team then felt very strongly that we appeal, because we actually did win a couple of, let's say, points, again, not a legal term, but we did win a couple of points in the judicial review. And so the legal team felt very strongly that we should appeal, and that perhaps another judge would see things differently, which they did. So we have then been granted permission to appeal. So the stage that we're at now is that we are holding on to the funds, a lot of the funds that we raised that are have been capped by the court. So we don't need to raise any more money, which is good. We've been told, that money you need to have put aside for court fees. We have been granted an appeal. We're waiting. We believe it will be before the end of the year, but I don't have any specific dates. And I think we're at a stage where a lot of people say to us, well, why don't you give up? Why don't you donate that money to charity? Well, we can't, because it's been held by the court. So we can't do anything with the money. The money's there in a pot that no one can touch. And then a lot of people say, well, why don't you give up? Because things aren't going to change now. We're used to the ban now. And I think what's really helped is our legal team saying the government should be held to account. And so if a judge thinks that you have an arguable case, we may not succeed, or we may succeed and then the government may go and do things all correctly and the ban will still go ahead. But it's still very important to challenge. And I think particularly what we've all learned from this is when it comes to animal welfare, the government doesn't always have the best track record. And so we do need to take a stand when we can. And so, yes, we continue. Or definitely our legal team continue. They are always working incredibly hard.
Well, you continue too, because you showed up for a podcast and you're sharing your story. And I think it's amazing that more people will understand a bit more nuance with regards to what is actually going on. I'm curious, and I know that you're part of a big group, but what has been the personal cost to you through this journey?
Gosh, that's a very deep question. My life and my relationship were what one sort of, definitely had some personal things that happened in my life over the course of the ban coming into place and today that has definitely changed my life. Although, I'm in a good place now, so that's fine. Definitely from a business perspective as well, the amount of time that it took up, because when a journalist is calling you at 7 a.m. asking you to do a radio interview at midday, or, they're calling you the night before to try and get you on for the breakfast show, it was a case of, I can't say no. I have to say yes to this because, first of all, if I can convince somebody, or if I can talk some sense, or I can be the counter argument to the people that are saying, euthanize all these dogs, then I need to do it. So it definitely cost me personally and from a business perspective. But I just think that things come back around and you go through these experiences for a reason. And I've learned so much through this experience, learned so much about the law, can always say that me and the rest of Don't Ban Me, License Me have taken the government to court, which is quite cool. I know if my grandma was still alive, she would love that.
Yeah.
And I've met some incredible people along the way. I mean, the people in the dog world, and I was never involved in the dog world before, but I think when you're in, you can't escape, you're in.
I completely agree.
And that's actually a pleasure.
It really is. Like, I feel like people are just wired differently, not better or worse, but just there's a different kind of, I guess, underlying understanding also of the fact that we are responsible for these creatures who can't advocate for themselves. So I think it's absolutely incredible that people have taken that responsibility on, people such as yourself and the people that work with you to kind of change the way that people view these animals, and then also kind of like the environments that they get to experience life in. And what would you say to people who are considering potentially starting grassroots movements, or see some sort of adjustment or change that needs to happen? Like, what would you tell them to affect change?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think so important. And this is, I think, where we did thrive. And a lot of what I do in my day job came into this, because I literally go into companies and I tell them about how to help people to feel valued and how to build a good culture. And I think if we didn't have a good culture within the 10 of us that were at the start of this campaign, gone to where it went, it was really important to me that the 10 people in the group, ultimately, we were, us and our dogs were the most important. So if ever there was something going on and we were on a deadline to get something to the media or whatever it might be, no, your dog is more important. If there's something happening with your dog, we all drop everything and we help you with that. So we had a couple of kind of foundational things as a group that helped us to feel like we were supporting each other and that we valued each other for our different skill sets. So that was very important. It was also really important to build trust with the public as well. And unfortunately, even though if I could have chosen, I wouldn't have been the face of it. It was very important to have a face to the campaign. And I do acknowledge that. And I think what a lot of people liked about me being in the media is that I wasn't the stereotype, let's say, that the media was saying owned these dogs. And a lot of people were saying, you look like me, you talk like me, and that's helped ultimately. So I think that's important. And I also think leveraging any connections that you have that can support you. So we had the amazing Sophie Taylor from Taylor and Floof, who does kind of very cool dog accessories and things, who, funny enough, I used to walk Billy with, immediately messaged me and said, how can I help? And I said, please, can you design a logo for us? This is our name. We've thought of it, you know, but within hours, she had the logo back to us, you know, free of charge. I had another friend design the whole website for us. Leverage everything you can, because when you can't do it all yourself. So yeah, I think they are some of the real key things. And then I think being really clear about your message. For us, Don't Ban Me was the obvious one. We had a lot of XL bully owners that were following us for that purpose and the legal challenge, but really conveying what the alternative was how to bring other dog owners on board as well. Because our pillars are not, you know, overly detailed, but they're things that everyone can agree with. Do we want responsible dog ownership in the UK? Yes. Is regulating breeding a good idea? Yes. So having those real simple points that everybody could get behind was really important. But I'm always happy to speak to people if they're campaigning and they want to have a chat about some of the kind of key learnings and key tips. Always happy to share. So our main social media following is across Instagram and Facebook. And that's kind of where we built that following and decided to focus on as well. In hindsight, I think Twitter would have been a very good place, or X would have been a very good place to be, because the media are very much on that platform.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Maybe a tip for anyone in grassroots campaigning.
Very good tip. Thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, I have one more question. What do you think Billy would say about all of this if he could share his thoughts and opinion? And secondly, what do you think we can learn from dogs?
What would Billy say? Well, I hope that he would be quite proud. I love the fact that dogs, you know, all our dogs are so clueless, and we sometimes say, you know, they have got absolutely no idea what we are going through, trying to fight for them and trying to give them better quality of life and, you know, fight for their welfare. I do hope that he would be proud. He's we've definitely got similar personalities, I think, in the way that we are. But he makes me laugh every day. So that's been the sort of thing that's carried me through everything that we've done. What can we learn from dogs? I tell you what, I will leave you with a quote, actually, from a man called Dr. Robert Hartman, whose work is my foundation in my own work. And my favourite quote of his, he's got so many, and lots of them are very educational and some of them are quite funny, is that he says, your intrinsic being, your humble self, is what makes dogs lick you. And I think that the meaning behind that is that if you're an authentic person and you are good within, you know, you have that intrinsic quality, dogs will sense that and dogs will lick you, or maybe just come over for a little stroke. But they can sense
purity of heart, I guess. Yeah. Oh, that's really wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to look him up. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate you being here, sharing your message. This was a really wonderful conversation and I learned loads from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Nadine. It's been really nice just to have a relaxed conversation about this and take a look back.